The Cascade Mountains stood sentinel, their peaks dusted with perpetual snow, guarding the quiet valleys below. Here, nestled deep within their embrace, lived 78-year-old Eleanor Ellie Morgan, a widow whose life flowed as quietly as the nearby creek. Silence was her companion, the sigh of the wind through the pines her daily music, the memories of her late husband Thomas, her bittersweet solace. Her small cabin, weathered by seasons and time, was a haven of solitude, but the wilderness holds surprises, moments that ripple the calm surface of predictability. This story begins with such a ripple, an unexpected arrival that would forever alter the rhythm of Ellie's world. It's a tale steeped in the raw beauty of nature, the vulnerability of the orphaned, and the profound, often unspoken, language of compassion that can bridge the divide between species. We witness the blossoming of an unlikely bond, fragile yet fierce, between an elderly woman and four wild hearts. It explores the pain of necessary separation, the quiet ache of letting go, and the astonishing ways kindness can echo back, returning tenfold in moments of unexpected peril, proving that connections forged in care can endure even the call of the wild. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. The scent of pine needles and damp earth was the constant perfume of Ellie's existence. Her days followed a gentle pattern, marked by the shifting light across the valley floor. She tended her small garden, read books by the crackling fire, and watched the deer graze tentatively at the edge of the woods. Loneliness was a familiar ghost, sometimes sharp, sometimes merely a dull ache in the background noise of her quiet life. Thomas had been gone for 5 years, and while the mountains offered a stark beauty, they also amplified the silence he left behind. She often spoke to his photograph on the mantelpiece, sharing small observations about the weather or the jays squabbling outside. Life was predictable, safe, contained within the familiar boundaries of her property and her memories. Then came the rumble of an engine, an unusual sound that broke the afternoon calm. Peering through the window, Ellie saw the familiar green truck of the state's Fish and Wildlife Department pull up her gravel driveway. Jake Thompson stepped out, his young face etched with concern. Ellie remembered him as a lanky teenager in her high school English class years ago, always asking thoughtful questions. Now, he wore the crisp uniform of a game warden, his posture serious. He walked to the passenger side, his movements careful, almost hesitant. Ellie opened her door, the hinges groaning softly. "Jake, is everything all right?" she called out, her voice raspy from disuse. Jake turned, managing a weak smile. "Afternoon, Mrs. Morgan, Ellie." He paused, gathering his words. I have something difficult to ask." He reached into the truck and carefully lifted out a sturdy cardboard box punctured with air holes. A faint, high-pitched mewling sound drifted from within. Ellie's heart gave a strange little jump. "What is it, Jake?" He carried the box towards her, his expression troubled. "There was an accident," he began, his voice low. "A logging truck up on the switchbacks hit a female bobcat. He swallowed hard. She didn't make it." Ellie drew a sharp breath, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh, the poor thing." "She had kittens, Ellie," Jake continued, lifting the box lid slightly. Ellie peered inside. 4 pairs of blurry blue eyes blinked up at her from a huddled mass of spotted fur. They were impossibly small, their cries thin and desperate, tiny mouths opening blindly, searching for warmth and sustenance. A wave of pity washed over Ellie, so strong it almost buckled her knees. "They're orphans," Jake said softly. "Barely a few weeks old, I reckon. Too young for the rehab center just yet. They need constant, round-the-clock care for a while." He looked directly into her eyes, his plea unspoken but clear. "The centers are overwhelmed right now, and frankly, well, you live out here, you understand this place." Ellie hesitated, her mind racing. Kittens, wild bobcat kittens, it was madness. She was 78, she lived alone, how could she possibly manage? "Jake, She started, ready to decline, to explain how impractical it was. But then one of the kittens let out a particularly pitiful cry, a sound that tugged at something deep within her. She saw their helplessness, their utter dependence. She remembered cradling her own children, long grown and moved away, the fierce protective instinct that motherhood ignited. They need warmth, frequent feeding, special formula, Jake was saying. It's a huge commitment, Ellie. And, he added, his tone becoming serious, it's crucial they don't become habituated to humans. They need to stay wild if they are ever going to have a chance back out there. Minimal handling discouraged dependency. His words were a necessary caution, a professional warning clashing with the desperate reality huddled in the box. Ellie looked from Jake's earnest face to the tiny, trembling creatures. The silence of her cabin seemed to press in, suddenly feeling vast and empty. She thought of the mother, struck down on a lonely mountain road. She thought of these small lives hanging precariously in the balance. "Just temporarily?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Until they're strong enough for the center." Jake nodded, relief flooding his features. "Exactly, just a foster situation. A few weeks, maybe a couple of months at most. I can bring you all the supplies, formula, bottles, show you what to do." Ellie took a deep breath, the scent of pine seeming sharper now. "All right, Jake," she said, the decision settling in her heart with a surprising weight of certainty. "Bring them inside." The cabin, once a bastion of quiet solitude, was instantly transformed. The mewling cries filled the space, demanding attention, shattering the peace. Jake helped Ellie set up a makeshift den in a large dog crate lined with soft blankets and a heating pad set on low. He carefully showed her how to mix the special kitten milk replacer, how to hold the tiny creatures securely while feeding them with a small syringe, then graduating to a bottle. Their little bodies felt impossibly fragile in her hands, their fur softer than anything she had ever touched. Their fierce, albeit tiny, sucking reflex was a testament to their will to survive. The first few days were a blur of feedings every 2 hours, day and night. Sleep became a fragmented luxury. Ellie, accustomed to her quiet routines, found herself immersed in a world of warm milk, gentle cleaning with damp cloths, and the constant, soft sounds of the kittens. She moved with a purpose she hadn't felt in years, her own aches and pains fading into the background, overshadowed by the needs of her tiny charges. Despite Jake's warnings about minimal handling and avoiding attachment, Ellie found it impossible not to speak to them, her voice soft and soothing. As she cared for them, she began to see their distinct personalities emerge. There was the boldest one, the first to crawl out of the huddle, whom she named Rascal. Another, darker in coloring and more cautious, she called Shadow. The third, a female with slightly larger ears that seemed attuned to every sound, became Sky. And the last, the smallest, who seemed to possess a quiet determination, she christened Jasper. She whispered their names as she fed them, as she checked their warmth, as she watched them sleep in a tangled pile of spotted fur. "You're fighters, aren't you?" she murmured to Jasper one night, stroking his tiny head with one finger. "Just like your mama must have been." A connection began to form, subtle at first, then undeniable. It wasn't the cuddly affection of a domestic cat. It was something wilder, more tentative. But when Rascal first tentatively licked her finger after a feeding, or when Shadow, startled by a noise, scrambled towards her for reassurance, Ellie felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the heating pad. The silence of the cabin was replaced by the tiny squeaks, growls, and purrs of the growing kittens. Ellie found herself smiling more, laughing at their clumsy attempts to pounce on dust bunnies or each other's tails. They were a spark of life, chaotic and demanding, but undeniably vibrant. Jake visited regularly, bringing supplies and checking on the kitten's progress. He was impressed by Ellie's dedication, but gently reminded her of the goal: release. "They look great, Ellie, really healthy," he'd say, watching them explore their crate with increasing confidence. "But remember, less contact is better now. We need them to start thinking like bobcats." Ellie nodded, understanding the necessity, yet feeling a pang of sadness. How could she not feel attached to these creatures she had nursed from the brink? As the weeks passed, the kittens grew rapidly. Their blue eyes sharpened into the keen yellow gaze of predators. Their coordination improved, their play becoming more sophisticated, mimicking the stalking and pouncing motions they would need in the wild. The crates soon became too small, their energy too boundless for the confines of the cabin. They tumbled and wrestled, their claws occasionally snagging the furniture, their explorations growing bolder. Ellie knew the next step was necessary, both for their development and for her sanity. She discussed it with Jake, and together they planned an outdoor enclosure. Building it took several days, with Jake providing the heavy-duty wire mesh and posts, and Ellie helping where she could, her hands, though wrinkled, surprisingly deft. They chose a spot near the edge of the woods, partially shaded by tall fir trees, incorporating fallen logs and rocks to create a more natural environment. It was large, secure, and offered the kittens a taste of the outdoors while keeping them safe. The day she moved them into the enclosure was difficult. She carried them out one by one, her heart heavy. Rascal, bold as ever, immediately began exploring, sniffing every corner. Shadow hesitated, peering out from the carrier before cautiously venturing forth. Sky climbed atop a log, her ears twitching, taking in the new sights and sounds. Jasper found a sheltered spot beneath a rock overhang and watched his siblings. Ellie stood outside the mesh, watching them. She felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. They looked so right out here, their spotted coats blending with the dappled sunlight and shadows. But the physical barrier of the wire mesh was also an emotional one. Her role was shifting from constant caregiver to distant observer. She reduced her direct interaction significantly, following Jake's instructions. Feedings became less frequent and were delivered discreetly, encouraging them to rely less on her presence. Jake brought live mice occasionally, placing them inside the enclosure to stimulate their hunting instincts. Ellie watched, sometimes through binoculars from her window, as they learned to stalk and pounce with growing skill. It was fascinating and heartbreaking. She saw the wildness sharpening in their eyes, the innate behaviors taking over. They were becoming what they were meant to be, but it meant they were growing away from her. She documented their progress in a small notebook, noting their weight gain, their hunting successes, their increasing wariness of sounds beyond the enclosure. She knew the time for the rehabilitation center was approaching. Jake confirmed it on his next visit. "They're ready, Ellie. They're strong, wary, showing good instincts. The center can give them the final preparation for release, exposure to a larger, more natural space, minimal human contact." Ellie nodded slowly, tracing the rim of her teacup. "I know, Jake. It's time." The morning Jake arrived to collect them dawned clear and crisp, the autumn air sharp with the promise of winter. Ellie went out to the enclosure one last time. The 4 young bobcats watched her approach, their bodies tense, alert. They were no longer the tiny, helpless kittens she had held in her hands. They were sleek, muscular, nearly full-grown adolescents, radiating wild energy. She didn't try to touch them. She simply stood there, her gaze moving from one to the other. "Rascal," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Shadow, Sky, my little Jasper. You be safe out there," she continued, tears blurring her vision. "Be strong, be wild, be free." She didn't know if they understood her words, but perhaps they sensed the love and the farewell in her tone. Sky tilted her head, her yellow eyes fixed on Ellie's face for a long moment. Then Jake arrived with the transport crates. The process of coaxing the wary bobcats inside was tense but quick. Ellie watched as Jake carefully loaded the crates into his truck. She raised a hand in a final, silent goodbye as the truck pulled away, its rumble fading down the gravel road, leaving behind an unnerving silence. The cabin felt cavernous, the quiet pressing in on her once more. The empty enclosure stood like a monument to her temporary charges, a reminder of the life that had pulsed there just moments before. Ellie walked back inside, the ache in her chest profound. She had done the right thing, the necessary thing. But oh, how it hurt. Months melted away. Autumn painted the cascades in fiery hues before yielding to the stark white blanket of winter. Snow fell thick and heavy, isolating Ellie's cabin even further. The wind howled around the eaves, rattling the window panes. Ellie stoked the fire, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the familiar solitude settle back into its old patterns. She often thought of the bobcats, wondering where they were, if they had adapted, if they were surviving the harsh mountain winter. She scanned the snowy woods from her window, hoping for a glimpse, but saw nothing. They were wild now, assimilated back into the vast expanse of the national forest as they should be. Her brief chapter with them was closed. One particularly fierce blizzard descended upon the mountains, raging for 2 days straight. Snowdrifts piled high against the cabin walls, blocking the road, cutting Ellie off completely from the outside world. The power flickered and died, plunging the cabin into a deeper cold and darkness, lit only by the hesitant glow of the fireplace and a few emergency candles. Ellie huddled near the hearth, trying to stay warm, feeling a prickle of unease. The isolation felt different this time, more menacing. Late on the second night of the storm, amidst the roaring wind, she heard another sound, a crunching noise outside, footsteps in the deep snow. Heavy, deliberate. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Who would be out in this? Then a hard thump against the back door, followed by another, stronger. Someone was trying to break in. Panic seized her. She was alone, trapped, miles from any help. The phone line was dead. She scrambled away from the door, her heart hammering against her ribs, casting about wildly for something, anything, to defend herself with. The heavy fireplace poker felt flimsy in her trembling hands. The wood splintered near the lock as a heavy boot kicked the door again. Ellie squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable intrusion, a silent prayer on her lips. Suddenly, erupting from the snowy darkness outside, came a sound that was not the wind, a low, guttural growl filled with feral menace. Then another and another, a chorus of terrifying snarls. Confused, Ellie risked a glance towards the small window near the door. Through the swirling snow, illuminated briefly by the flickering candlelight from within, she saw shapes. Low-slung, powerful forms moving with predatory grace through the drifts. Spotted coats, tufted ears, intense yellow eyes burning in the dim light. Bobcats, but not just any bobcats. She recognized the patterns, the sizes. Rascal leading the charge, larger now, formidable. Shadow, sleek and silent beside him. Sky, agile and fierce. And Jasper, smaller but no less determined, flanking them. They had converged on the back porch, directly confronting the figures trying to force the door. The men outside, there were 2 of them. She could see their dark shapes now recoiled, startled by the sudden appearance of the wildcats. Shouts of alarm cut through the wind. The bobcats didn't hesitate. With chilling screams and explosive bursts of speed, they launched themselves at the intruders. It wasn't a playful pounce. It was a territorial defense, furious and protective. Snarls, hisses, the terrified yells of the men, the thud of bodies colliding, the sounds filled the night air. Ellie watched, frozen in place, a strange mix of terror and astonishment washing over her. The attack was swift, brutal, and effective. The robbers, clearly not anticipating armed resistance in the form of 4 angry bobcats, stumbled back, yelling in pain and fear. One clutched his arm where sharp claws had likely found their mark. They scrambled away from the cabin as quickly as they could, plunging back into the blinding snowstorm, their retreat hasty and panicked. Silence fell again, broken only by the howl of the wind and Ellie's own ragged breathing. Slowly, cautiously, she crept towards the window again. The 4 bobcats stood on the porch for a moment, surveying the area, their breath pluming in the frigid air. They looked towards the cabin door, towards the faint light spilling out. For a heartbeat, Ellie's gaze met skies across the distance. There was no recognition in the way a pet would show it, no softening. The eyes were wild, untamed. Yet there was something, an awareness perhaps, a stillness. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they turned. Rascal gave a low chuff, and one by one they melted back into the swirling snow, disappearing into the white wilderness that was their home. Ellie stood there for a long time, the poker forgotten in her hand, her fear slowly replaced by a profound sense of wonder and gratitude. They had come back. Not to her, perhaps, not in the way she had known them, but they had been nearby. They had recognized a threat within their territory, near a place, near a presence they somehow remembered. They had protected her. The storm eventually passed, and Jake was the first one to reach her, checking on her welfare after the blizzard. Ellie told him what had happened, her voice still trembling slightly with the memory. Jake listened, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief and finally to quiet amazement. He examined the tracks around the cabin, the signs of the struggle, the distinct paw prints of 4 bobcats leading away into the forest. "Incredible," he murmured, shaking his head. "They stayed in the area, they remembered." He looked at Ellie, a new respect in his eyes. "You saved them, Ellie, and tonight, well, it seems they returned the favor." Life in the Cascade Mountains returned to its quiet rhythm for Ellie. The snow melted, giving way to the tentative green of spring. But something had shifted within her, a sense of connection to the wild tapestry around her that ran deeper than before. She never saw the robbers again, but she did see the bobcats, not often and never up close. Sometimes she'd catch a fleeting glimpse of a spotted flank disappearing into the undergrowth at the edge of her property. Once, she saw Skye perched on a high rock outcrop, surveying the valley, a silent, watchful guardian. Another time, during a thaw, she found 4 distinct sets of paw prints leading down to the creek and back towards the deep woods. They kept their distance, living their wild lives, independent and free. Yet their presence lingered, a subtle reassurance, a testament to the bond forged in those early weeks of care. They were not pets, they were not tame, but they remembered. Ellie understood that the fierce protection they offered wasn't born of domestication, but perhaps from an instinctual memory, a recognition of a place and a presence associated with safety during their most vulnerable time. An echo of kindness, reverberating through the wild heart of the mountains. She continued her quiet life, tending her garden, reading her books, talking to Thomas's picture. But now the silence didn't feel quite so empty. It felt watchful, protective. She knew she wasn't truly alone. Out there in the vast, untamed wilderness, 4 pairs of wild eyes carried a memory of warmth, of care, of a time when a lonely old woman had opened her heart and her home, asking for nothing in return. Kindness sown, even in the wildest hearts, can blossom into unexpected protection, an enduring testament to the connections that transcend words and species. If you enjoyed the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.